Back with more NBA coverage, and in this one, there are a lot of other moves that have taken place since the initial wave from the first couple of days of the free agency moratorium. Now, with waiting on talking about those moves for all this time, we have now triggered the point in which free agents can officially sign with their teams. So, as of this point moving forward, it had already passed the 12:01 mark today, which is where on July 6th, typically these teams can start to ink the contracts for all these different players. And all the moves that you've heard about this time, they move on from the label of being simply reported deals and reported trades. They become official as of today and moving forward into pretty much the regular season. So all of these things are going to be in writing. You don't have to wait much longer for the actual photo shoots of these players in their new threads, in their new uniforms, and being around their teammates for ordained practices and sanctioned activities with their specific squads. As for the moves, though, a lot of these are not to the same level of the blockbuster trades that have taken place to this point. And of course, everyone is still in flux, literally acting so far in over their heads for a whiteboard that Rich Paul put up on his podcast with Max Kellerman over the decision of where LeBron may potentially sign next and shit like that. That is still up in the air at this point. We don't have an idea about that decision. But let's get on to the actual discussion about the moves that have actually taken place, rather than just investing our time solely in that. The 76ers, and a lot of these moves and reported deals were all from Shams Charania, with the exception of one. The 76ers signed Anfernee Simons to a 2-year, $12.3 million deal. Think about it this way for a second, because, at first, upon first looking at it, it reads like a Quentin Grimes replacement. You would think so. The way that Anfernee Simons typically plays on the basketball court, especially when he has started in majority or all of a season like he had in Portland, he has a reputation as a little bit of a shot chucker. I've just got to be honest about that. Those Portland teams were not good, and with them still trying to figure out at that time who was going to handle majority of the responsibilities between Damian Lillard and maybe a secondary option, it just so happened to be Anfernee Simons in that position. It did not go the greatest. Yes, he was there. He would have those games where he'd just act like a flamethrower, and then he'd just fizzle out in no short order from there. So he has had that reputation for a little bit of a while, and moving on from the Blazers in the offseason to then join the Celtics, that role changed. They were set, basically, at the guard position. They didn't need Simons to start a lot of the games. And the ones that he did, he typically performed well. And all last year for Boston, he really played fine as a six-man. That was the idea, getting him in the offseason. They had him shoot 44% from the field and 39.5% from deep, fitting right in to the flow of that three-oriented offense. They want to create all their shots from there. They want to take a majority of their shots from the field outside the three-point line, and he was extremely efficient at doing that. It didn't eat up too much of the offense at that point either, because, frankly, you needed it with Jason Tatum being out for the year. But he was eventually moved on from, got sent to the Bulls, and with their guard problem, he didn't even really get a lot of playing time. You saw a little bit of a dip in his efficiency, which is always what you have to watch out for. And that's the same thing I would say for the 76ers here. Like, as a six-man, being able to offer some of the same things that Quentin Grimes did off the bench, and for way cheaper considering the contract that Quentin Grimes just got, compared to what they were able to give Anfernee Simons at just around $6.15 million per year. That is very low value for a true bona fide six-man on your roster. At least a guy who can, as well, with LeBaron Fallon Jr. off the bench. If you need Fallon Jr. to distribute the ball, there might not be many better options on that back line right now to give it up to than him. And he'd be able to fit in there perfectly. Like, you don't really trust any of the other bench players that they have at this point to get that done as particular scorers. Although all those guys provide defense, so it offsets enough. That's what they were looking for. You wanted to try to fill out your bench depth a little more after really securing your starting lineup for the most part over the past week and some change. So it's a very good move from the 76ers for that standpoint alone. Here's what we have to consider. The specific reasoning for the Celtics moving on from Anfernee Simons last year in the first place was the fact that they believed he was going to cost too much. As we outlined, the Celtics have spent the last couple years plus trying to get under the second apron and trying to become as flexible as possible while avoiding any restrictions when it comes to trades, when it comes to signing other players, and when it comes to potentially losing draft capital if it gets to a specific point. So they've been desperate to do it. And they've had to cost cut by any means, quite frankly, over this time. Now, his stock at the time, the way they were playing it, they were hiking it up. It seemed to reach its peak with what he was doing as a six-man for them. And that's when they decided, you know what, we're just going to move on from him. Because the challenge was, would they be able to pay him handsomely in the offseason? They didn't believe that they were able to do so. And as a result, he left the team. They were able to shore that up with having Peyton Pritchard assume the role and take a bit of a hike in his own production throughout the rest of the regular season and even part of the playoff series against this same team. So I guess they would not be losing too much sleep over that, but think about it this way. You don't get that far under the second apron by trading away Jaylen Brown in the first place last week. And then you proceed this week to indirectly, from this standpoint, for the second time in the last few days, the Celtics have managed to assist Philadelphia. You basically allow them to pick up Anfernee Simons for the low, when your fear the entire time was that he probably was on the path to get a contract similar to that of Quentin Grimes. They slashed that price by a very great margin. He's only getting paid like a fifth of the contract that Quentin Grimes has right now, seeing as he got a 4-year, $60 million deal with the Lakers. And your asses had him before the trade deadline last year with an opportunity to at least keep that scoring threat off your bench. Now you don't have that anymore. And you don't have Jaylen Brown. And you proceed to gift wrap both of those things, both of those kinds of players, to your rival opponent for the second time this week. They have literally cooked themselves. Now again, they can't control the fact that this market was going to fluctuate for Anfernee Simons once he left. But damn, just so many missed opportunities and decisions for this Celtics organization that have not aged well in this time frame. And this is why they find themselves where they are right now. But it greatly benefits Philadelphia once again. You don't want him commandeering the ship per se, but coming off the bench on top of the fact that, hey, you may be able to share some rotational minutes with a few of the starters if there's a night where they may go cold from outside. It's an ideal spot for Anfernee Simons to be in at this point right now. Nick Nurse is also a good enough coach to where, aside from, yeah, Let me get it right. Because Joe Mazzulla is also a similar kind of coach. Those guys definitely have a structure about their team that they love to implement. So to have Anfernee Simons back in that can help him a lot as well. He's going to be pretty much in his prime at this point. He will be 28 throughout the year. And so, it's not crazy to suggest that he deserves this kind of deal. It's a bit of a bargain, if you ask me, comparing that to Quentin Grimes' contract. Even if Simons, shockingly, is a slightly older player. Yeah, who would have guessed that? But, shit. What are you going to say? Well, he's 27, rather. Let me not shortchange him like that. He's 27. But yeah, that is solid for Philadelphia in every respect. And, you can combine it multiple ways with him being at the guard position. Because, honestly, you can never have enough threats from three-point range in this day. The more you can have on your team, even if they aren't inherently sharpshooters, it just always gives you another element to use and wield against an opposing team, to the point where you may not be able to stop them at all. That's just how it is. The Raptors, on the other hand, signed Kyle Anderson to a 1-year, $3.9 million deal. I'm very interested to see here because, they have him listed here as the third string power forward. Kyle Anderson is one of those players now, throughout his last few stops where he wouldn't be expected to log a lot of minutes every single night. But as a rotational piece, and potentially as a third stringer here, also being labeled a fifth string small forward, it gives them more wing depth than they might have expected. Kyle Anderson is obviously not expected to carry the load offensively. That would just be ridiculous, especially with the way he moves around on the court. But as a sneaky playmaker, having that off the bench can help this team in so many ways. It takes the burden off of Scotty Barnes to have to control every single aspect of every single game. As if getting Kawhi Leonard didn't already do that, that just adds to it. Even if you're thinking about an inferior player here. It also shores up, some of the other players that have just recently gotten picked up by this team. Like your Trace Jackson Davises, like your Colin Murray Boyles, who really came onto the scene after the playoff run he had with Toronto last year. Kyle Anderson being in that mix gives them an opportunity to, look at an established veteran who has prowess in ways on both sides of the ball, especially as a defender, coming through that system with Greg Popovich initially and then taking his talents elsewhere throughout his journeyman-level career. It does not get much better than that for all these guys involved, to be fair. So I'll give that respect to Kyle Anderson. As he essentially, in his spot, if you need him to guard a 4 or 5, and he can also make it tough for some of the other positions as well when he wants to and when he has the energy to keep up with those guys. No matter who would get subbed in for the Raptors theoretically throughout the course of a game, your first team, your second team, your third team, you could say that each one of these has at least some form of capable defense. And for a team that was already within the top 5, I believe, defensively, let alone, if not top 10, throughout the year as an entire unit, then there's no reason to believe that with adding Kyle Anderson, with adding some of the other pieces they have throughout the offseason, they can't at least retain that to some extent. Like, it's going to be very difficult to put a body up on this team. Kyle Anderson may move slow, but we got to continue to be fair. He knows how to use that strength. He's not just going to be pushed past on each and every single drive. He will use the proper defensive technique. He will slide his feet. He will use all of his wingspan to alter your shot trajectory and even sometimes obstruct a player's vision from being able to see the hoop in the first place. All those things Kyle Anderson are capable of. Each and every single one. And as long as you're keeping it that way, as long as you're not giving him an increased role, that does fit in pretty well with the Raptors, I'd have to admit. I've said my things. I've talked my shit about Kyle Anderson on numerous occasions, but hey, I mean, you can't go wrong, honestly, with keeping or picking him up. And again, it's really just about bridging the gap. Like, you have a clear timeline with some of these younger players, and Kyle Anderson himself is 33. If it works, it works, but chances are you aren't really planning to look into him for the long term. And that's honestly okay to admit for the Raptors, knowing what they've been able to do in some of the most recent drafts, especially when it comes to their wings and slash centers even. So they'll be fine from that angle as well. All right. The Nuggets re-signed Tyus Jones on a 1-year deal. This one is just kind of tricky. I mean, we expect this Tyus Jones as well, especially with what he was able to do as a backup for Ja Morant in Memphis. We were expecting him to do similar things in the non-Jokic minutes and in cases where Jamal Murray might not have been seeing the floor. It was just a weird year for him last season. Very weird year. He came in pretty much so late in the year. So late. He did not appear in many games with the Nuggets, specifically playing in only 11 and getting a chance to start in 2. They believe that Tyus Jones in the long run, signing him to a short-term contract, they just want to see what he can pull off in a full season for them. Because he bounced around. He was in Orlando. He was, weirdly enough, with the Mavericks for a very brief stint. A very brief stint of 8 games. Throughout this 2025 season as well. He never really got a chance to prove himself out there. Or really immerse himself into what the Nuggets are trying to run on a night-to-night basis. Not really understanding the playbook under Adelman as others would. And as a result, again, as great of a value backup point guard Tyus Jones can be and has proven to be, no. Just not this time around. It's unfortunate when you look at it, but hey, it's the chance for Tyus Jones to prove himself, potentially have his stock rise back up a little bit, and either decide from there to stay with the Nuggets or potentially move on in the next offseason. It's just rough. This is far from the first time that Tyus Jones has had to deal with this in his NBA career, as he now enters his age 30 season. Upcoming, right? It's far from the first time. But you would think if he can stay healthy, mainly, if he can get on the court for this team, it does provide them off the bench, because that's where he'd be, with a great arsenal of playmaking tools. And it gives them an edge in that respect that they, per some other sources, might potentially be losing. They were expecting similar things from that of Jonas Valanciunas as a backup, and honestly, decisions like that are what helped the Nuggets for at least the first half of the season or majority of the year to turn around their problem they consistently dealt with when it came to the non-Jokic minutes, of just completely tanking away leads and not even really making it a competition in the moments where Jokic was off the floor. Like, the splits were that bad. They started to even out a little more as a result of Valanciunas' presence on top of others on that second unit. And there are teams out there who have apparently been rumored to look into Jonas Valanciunas this offseason. So they may potentially lose him. Who's to say whether they actually will or they won't. But if they do, then you supply that void and fill it immediately by having Tyus Jones on your roster by default. And you can't go wrong with that, especially if it's, again, a one-year deal. Nothing too crazy, nothing too expensive for it. Just, buying low on him and hoping that you can get a much greater reward with his play on the floor. The Suns signed Pat Spencer to a two-way contract, meaning that the Warriors lost him. And honestly, I don't know. The Warriors had a very weird guard problem themselves of, again, guys that are fairly young, but still trying to really figure out how to work around the NBA. Obviously, Pat Spencer became a bit of a fan favorite in the games that he did appear in, 111 across his time with the Warriors, and he saw a massive uptick in production last year in games where, with Kerr at the helm, he was even trusted to start on a few occasions, logging a career-high 14 starts across the year. He shot 35.7% from the three-point line and also averaged 7.2 points per game as well as 3.5 assists. He will be entering his age 30 season, although he had just gotten into the league from what was a promising and legendary lacrosse career in all its own space. He made the jump, and he has now found himself on a new ball club who looks to continue adding to that three-point shooting I'd assume that's what they would have Pat Spencer do at least. And in games where he may not play, since he's on a two-way contract, you'd have him working in the G League as well, potentially strengthening your core on the court in the lower level league to sustain and potentially win a title that way. It's not like it'll be the deciding factor in how the Suns perform, because Pat Spencer probably will not play all the time. But whenever he is ready, he'd be called up, and, he can give you some solid performances from game to game while not being asked to do all that much. That is totally fair. Moving on to the Spurs, as they, aside from making a true deal in free agency here, they hired Billy Donovan as their new lead assistant coach, per Shams Charania, as he will work alongside Mitch Johnson. And honestly, from that role specifically, I don't have a problem with it. Unlike many people out there. You see, Billy Donovan is a man who is obviously a legend in the college coaching scene. When it comes to the NBA, he's had his noted success, especially with the Thunder in the 2015 to basically 2019-2020 seasons. Going across that time, 243 and 157, I should say. So, those teams, obviously, the Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, even Paul George led on occasion teams, even when you get to 2019-20, when they were supposed to take a step back after losing Russell Westbrook, after already not having Kevin Durant on the roster, having Carmelo Anthony essentially at a dead end in his career and not playing for the team. That roster with CP3 and a younger SGA was still able to go 44 and 28 and qualify for the playoffs that season, advancing to the bubble and getting a first round exit at the hands of the Houston team that picked up Russell Westbrook during that earlier offseason. So Donovan has certainly had his own successes throughout this time, yet a lot of people want to look at the fact that, they just have a lot of PTSD about him. Pretty much every Bulls fan does, and granted, I can't blame them. The way that things have gone essentially since 2022, you can look at that alone and understand just how terrible it has been for Chicago. Now, again, that's across several different things. You look at the front office and how poorly they've drafted. You look at that same front office that had recently gotten fired, with the general manager and the vice president of basketball operations, I believe, now being ousted at that time, and how bad they were constructing trades by literally creating the core that had Levine, DeRozan, and Vucevic as their big three for some god-awful reason. Just truly a lot of other places to put, or a lot of other areas in which you should probably assign the blame than just Billy Donovan. Yes, the execution from him could have been questionable throughout these last 4 years in particular, but it's all about using what you have on the floor. And when you don't have that much to offer, as well as a shitty ownership group that doesn't even want anything to do with the team, you're naturally going to run into some problems. So, as an individual coach, when it comes to being in the NBA, that still has yet to really be defined by some people at this time. As an assistant coach, you still have Mitch Johnson as the leading man in that Spurs locker room. But they were in desperate need of, a form, in a way, of assistance on that end. Yes, you can talk about Mitch Johnson not really knowing how to use his timeouts or allocate them well. You can question the clock management. You can question some of the play calls that Johnson committed to in clutch time situations as well, which is another thing that eventually did cost the Spurs in that series. And so, you have that support with such a culture as great as the Spurs are. But, Popovich, even if he was to, come to some of the locker room meetings, engage in talks with the players, he's not going to be as hands-on for obvious reasons, in the same way that a guy like Billy Donovan could be. So this works perfectly for San Antonio. You have a man who, again, has had his success with with coaching in the NBA in general. He knows firsthand how to navigate and lead a team, even if it hasn't always gone the best for him as a coaching figure. He has an understanding of that Mitch Johnson can now learn from entering his second full-time season with the staff. And when it comes to, making those snap decisions, you now have a guy that Mitch Johnson can look to and immediately trust to make the right decision in those moments and potential challenges that they might try to appeal for throughout the regular season, when it comes to lineup changes that might be suggested, any number of things that can be done to fortify a culture of consistent winning and consistent chemistry as well from all players on the court at all times. You wouldn't ask too many people to fill that role aside from Donovan. We just have to be as truthful about that as possible. You can talk shit about his reputation, but bro, at the end of the day, this is still Billy Donovan we're talking about. And, it's no accident that he's been able to coach that well for majority of his career. Even if you want to look at the talent pool that he's had, at some point you have to give him his own individual respect as a true coach in the game. And he can teach Johnson a few things that he potentially may never have learned, even with Popovich still being in that building. You have a direct pipeline to answer and respond to, in a way, your assistant coach, with Donovan being on the sideline now and having already done it before. So, from that standpoint, I like the move for them. I genuinely do. I take no issue with that at all. Now, on the other hand, moving on to the Rockets, they signed Tari Eason to a 5-year, $81.5 million deal. And not even just that, as Shams added, the deal is fully guaranteed. Now, in a perfect world, I would say that Tari Eason is totally deserving of that contract. And by no means am I casting shade on that, because, it's get your money. This kid was drafted in the first round, expected to come in and make an immediate impact for the Rockets, and, he joined a team that, at that point, they were coming off of the John Wall era. Short-lived as it might have been, they were in a constant state of just low-level basketball play for a few years after the James Harden trade. And so they weren't expected to do much when he first got there. Now we can say by the time he gets a new deal, he has played a role in turning this team around, in helping them become one of the top teams in the Western Conference, a perennial playoff contender once again, and right in line, with a few things, needing to go their way to be in contention for a title. That's how good the Rockets have become with him being added to this roster in 2022. So you can't take that away from him at all. At the same time, 2025 was a bit of a down year for him. And when you look at how much of a decline there was, when you look specifically at the months of March, as well as the first round series against the Lakers, and you see the efficiency just completely drop off. Like he went, in terms of three-pointers, I think during the month of March, they mentioned that he missed like 40 in a row. His percentage was astonishingly It was rough. It was a rough time for Eason. We got to be completely honest, man. So, you're seeing that, and typically, if you're a front office, looking at that in what would be his final year, because, again, Tari Eason as well, this isn't like this is coming out of the blue. He entered the season basically on the fringe. The Rockets had an opportunity to pay him last summer, and they, compared to the likes of Jabari Smith Jr., who had gotten paid, compared to the likes of Alperen Sengun, who had gotten paid at the start of the regular season in 2024, 2025, they had already made the decision that Eason was one of those guys that would have to wait for a deal. And I guess you could argue in doing that, they wanted him to prove that his career high season in 2024 or 2025 could be somewhat replicated and potentially across more time, as he played in only 57 games that year. He was more available, admittedly, but has not played a full season since 2022, his rookie season, in which he played all 82 games. So that's the thing that the Rockets have to question as well. Now, again, it's not coming from a player that is being invested in as much, but if you're going to give me a fully guaranteed deal, no holds barred, no restrictions whatsoever, you want to at least have more faith in a player's ability to remain durable for a great number of the season, or a great amount of games in the regular season. And Eason hasn't really fulfilled that to the same level, on top of the inefficiency problems. So those are all things that are going to have to get sorted out. And I mean, the Rockets are still in the same spot where they seem so close to being in contention, yet with the way it is constructed around Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun, there are still things that clearly need some work. And so, again, if they're going to pay Tari Eason the full deal, that is fine. But considering Tari Eason's build and considering what they want to do, especially as a defensive-minded team first, before we even get to three-point shots that they cannot consistently convert on, they need to find a true backup small forward, at least, and leave Tari Eason to play the four for them, which he is currently listed at right now. But you don't want to put that much responsibility on him, even if this is a fully guaranteed deal. Like, this has a potential, I don't know, because, even with some of the other deals that have been talked about, it's not like those are fully guaranteed. And, of course, you have to go through some hurdles as well when it comes to, shedding off some of the taxes of the funds and everything. Might not always come out to the same specific amount, but, like, shit. You know what I'm saying? You typically would give yourself a bit of a cushion here in case things don't go according to plan. Instead, Eason, gets a chance to set up pretty much everyone around him for quite a long while. Like, even he was kind of dismissive of it, saying, I guess, bro, a couple years or a couple hours before this signing got reported. And it's like, are we sure about that? The Rockets really could have been grimy and had given him far less than he might have truly wanted if they were looking so intently at the last month in a half stretch of the regular season. It would not have placed Tari Eason in any kind of position to warrant any kind of deal in another circumstance. You can't necessarily blame his frustration, but like, yeah, you gotta move on from some of that, because there's no way. The Celtics signed Neemias Queta to a 4-year, $56 million contract extension. And like I said, he earned that shit throughout the regular season. Now, yes, you bring in Mitchell Robinson, and you sign him as a backup potentially, but the prize should still be for Neemias Queta to start. And I just don't know why they keep swapping it. Like, they say that Robinson is now slotted in as the starter for this team. He should not be. Now, Queta, they were not expecting that much from him initially. I'll be honest about that. But this man, the only player from Portugal to play in the NBA, put together a season last year where, in any other context, he probably would have seen his minutes decrease. But everything, lined up. The fact that Tatum was out, the fact that they were in really a desperate need for a center to step up. Like, their front court looked a little bit weak at the backup position and at the third team position. And in seeing that, that is kind of where some people got their opinion that, hey, this team is in a bit of a gap year. And all Neemias Queta proceeded to do was start in 75 of the games last year and put together, frankly, the best season of his career. We're talking 10.2 points per game and 8.4 rebounds per game on 65.3% shooting, with 1.3 blocks per game also. So he was doing it on both ends of the floor as a lob threat and as a pretty energetic defender. He would not always be in the correct position, and it did cost them, especially by the end of the 76ers series, where, again, he specifically struggled just to stay on the floor and out of foul trouble. And that led to the 76ers just being able to take so much advantage of the bigs in these games after that particular time, which strongly helped them to be as aggressive as they possibly could have been. Like, Queta owns that, and again, it's tough to have that being the lasting image of him on your team before you have to decide to do something with him. I understand. But, you cannot underestimate what he did in the regular season at all. And I'm looking forward to see how he can, compound on that in year 2. Because they should allow him to do exactly that. I don't see why they would not right now. I'm not going to lie. The Pistons signed Javonte Green to a 1-year, $3.95 million deal. Again, he is another player for the Pistons who really did provide solid defense for them, including in the playoff campaign as well. And so having that consistently carry over for a guy who is not even really getting paid all that much, like those are margin plays for sure. But the Pistons seem to still be in the mode of trying to load up for a brand new talent to come to their team. And so if this is the case, signing Green to a 1-year deal feels worth it for them, at least. if they don't have to spend that much and potentially waste a lot of their money that they could use on another premium position. So, you have to give them credit for that as well. Moving on to the Rockets, as earlier in the week per Shams Charania, they traded Dorian Finney-Smith to the Hornets in exchange for 3 second rounders. And that was it for the trade. The Hornets, I'm telling you, man. The Hornets are dealing this offseason right now. They've gotten so active, and they just continue with this to add a weird mix of veteran talent and just all these draft assets still in their vault right now. Like, at least the Suns, or the Rockets rather, they at least get a little bit of asset control back, but those picks probably will not mean too much of anything, depending on how good the Rockets end up being throughout the regular season. Dorian Finney-Smith, it's just terribly unfortunate. Like, he was literally signed in 2025 in the NBA offseason around this same free agency point last year. And he just was not really given much of a role. I mean, he appeared in 37 games, started in just one, and averaged only 3.3 points per game and 27% shooting from deep. Like, I don't know if he would have ever been worth way, way more than this, but the reality is that in Houston, all they proceeded to do was diminish his trade value until it was left virtually next to nothing. And, you do kind of cringe at the lack of efficiency from Dorian Finney-Smith. If that does continue, then Charlotte can have a bit of a problem. But at the same time, that's why you get guys like Royce O'Neal. They have other young forwards who can fill that responsibility if need be. So once again, another move here where Finney-Smith will be able to provide that veteran presence as a 33-year-old, basically defensive-minded wing, and pass that on, especially to a guy like, Paul, I'm about to say that, but Brandon Miller, looks up to Paul George that much, defending at a high level as well. And Dorian Finney-Smith is well within the position to put him on absolute game when it comes to that. The 76ers, on the other hand, signed Caleb Love, I should say, to a two-way contract. The Arizona man, who had actually appeared in a few Blazers games across the year last year and put up some great performances of his own in the NBA, he gets a chance, honestly, with Philadelphia to just add more bench depth in moments where he may be called up from the G League. Because he spent a lot of time there over the course of the last season, aside from playing in a few Portland games. He played in 49 and averaged 10.4 points per game. The only thing with that is if he does find his role increasing on the team, because granted, in Portland, there were already so many guards as it was, and he wasn't really regarded as one of the top 5 on the team, so he had to get his minutes in a very unconventional manner. And by simply playing, honestly, in a way for survival to try to make it to the next NBA season, Caleb Love was able to do something truly spectacular. And so, carrying this man over, as he will turn 25 just before the season, to become, I guess, another huge asset for Philadelphia, it's pretty wild when you think about it. It's pretty wild. At last, at last. Hey, Lakers fans can rejoice, man. I have been clamoring for it the entire time throughout this offseason that they had to get DeAndre Ayton's ass out of Los Angeles. They had to. And with adding Walker Kessler last week via a trade that, honestly, again, I'll admit, I genuinely wasn't expecting, it opened the floodgates for that to happen. It had to. With you investing all that money in Walker Kessler, there wasn't a way that you could really keep a center on that kind of contract remaining on the roster. I would have preferred them to keep Jackson Hayes as a backup, but as long as the goal itself was accomplished, that's all that any Lakers fan should have really cared about. And well, per Shams Charania, you would get your answer for that, as they would trade DeAndre Ayton to the Wizards in exchange for Jaden Hardy and 2 second-rounders in 2031 and 2032. Just thinking about the trade on its head, because that's how I saw it upon taking a first glance at it. We'd been saying the entire time that it was DeAndre Ayton's last opportunity to really prove himself in this league. And although there were glimpses of it from time to time with the effort that he summoned during the later stretch of the season, especially in March, I'd say, and across a few of the playoff games, a few of them, you'll give DeAndre Ayton that credit, but for the most part, yeah, he did not play well with this Lakers team. The numbers will not tell you that. The tape will show all that you need to see in that regard. Just countless instances of miscues on the defensive end, drop passes on the offensive end, and a load of other things that only DeAndre Ayton could really pull off in the NBA. That is legitimately how it was for months on end, with this team fielding him out there for every single game. And they were still, even with him there, in search of a true A-level center, which they got in Kessler. And at that point, they didn't have much of a need for Ayton anymore, even as a backup. So he got punted to a team stuck in basketball purgatory for years. Potentially, I mean, the way you can frame it now, it has been pretty much 7 years. Even more, considering the unfortunate injuries that John Wall had to deal with while he was still a member of the squad. And literally being led by the likes of Bradley Beal, and even a season of him and Russell Westbrook, and then it just all went very deep down into the depths of doom for this team after that. Do you understand being a player in DeAndre Ayton's position, the former number 1 overall pick? No other team is really out here sticking their necks out, searching out a way to acquire you in this free agency period before this value is expressed for you. I need you to understand that. Because again, you want to look at it in a fair way. We have to be honest. How low can your value truly be to the point where you are getting sent over to the Wizards, not even for any first round pick at all, for a pair of second rounders that may end up mattering a little bit depending on where the Wizards are. But that's what you get back in Jaden Hardy, who, by all means, they've said some good things about his shooting and some of his defense as a backup in the league. But this is a man who has been around the horn in pretty much the last couple of trade deadlines in the NBA cycle. Like, he got to the Wizards via the trade deadline. And now he's sent over again to the Lakers in the same way. So at first glance, it's just like, we've come this far, where a man standing on his last leg is traded for that cheap? Damn. That could definitely rub you the wrong way. But going deeper into the trade, you could argue that both teams really get what they need. Both teams. For as garbage, as weak as DeAndre Ayton might be, mentally in ways, physically in ways, the return of getting him, the prospect of getting him for the Wizards, is not as bad of an idea as it might crack up to be right now. Because for a team that has been searching for answers, generally, you're getting a lot of talent on your roster, and you don't really know what exactly to do with all of it. This has been the case over the past few years. You know, even with some of the other picks that they've gotten. Like, I still don't know. I still don't know what the hell they'd even managed to do with Will Raleigh at this point. But they're starting to figure it out. You know, getting AJ DeBonce with the first pick opened up a lot of things for them. Now you're adding all this talent on your roster, and all of a sudden, you can start constructing this roster in several different ways. You have Trae Young at the helm. You signed him on a 4-year, $212 million deal for some reason, but he's there. They're starting to structure this team out just a little bit, and finally bring some order to this for the first time in literally forever, it seems like, for this Wizards team. So you're allocating this talent out a little bit differently now. And DeAndre Ayton is in a similar boat. Now again, if his ass is not going to play with fucking effort on the floor, then you have yourself a problem. But when DeAndre Ayton is there, he proved that he could be available. He played in all 72 games last season that he appeared, or started in all 72 games that he appeared in, and played in 72 games this season. So we can't question that. Yes, he dealt with some injury things, especially during his second season in Phoenix, his last couple of years in Portland. But if he's on the floor, you have an extra body that you retain in your backcourt. And frankly, the Wizards were seeking that out heavily. Alex Stahl appeared in only 48 games last season. And Anthony Davis, I mean, do we even need to... We know what the situation is with Anthony Davis right now. It goes without saying. He did not play a single game with the Wizards. So already you get a player in DeAndre Ayton who, despite his own setbacks with injury, was able to, last season, appear in more games than those two combined. And the only other somewhat big man that they have is a guy in Tristan Vukcevic that they signed to a very short-term deal last offseason, if I'm not mistaken. So, considering that that's the case, that is your only other healthy big man, oh yeah, you definitely needed a center of some sort in your roster. And to add that in DeAndre Ayton virtually for cheap, I mean, you can't hate on that at all. Honestly. You can't hate on that whatsoever. Like, I can't sit here and say that that is the worst idea in the world. Does it say all that much? Maybe not. But would you rather be without at least another legitimate playing center on that core? Or would you be without it and continue to just straggle on by throughout the year, hoping that these guys can continue to stay healthy? You want that to be the case. The reality is you can't 100% guarantee that. You need an insurance plan. You need a contingency plan. And you don't want to put all your chips on DeAndre Ayton. By no means do you want to put all your chips on DeAndre Ayton, assuming that title. You definitely don't want to play that game. They don't with a trade like this. I mean, those second round picks again, if the Wizards can honestly take those improvements in this season moving forward, it won't really mean that much to them. And Jaden Hardy as well was a player who, on a team filled with that much talent, still could not consistently be incorporated in the lineups for Brian Keefe. They could not find a role for him on the court. He also didn't really play that much. So, in different ways, Ayton not necessarily playing the best alongside Luka Doncic and Jaden Hardy, virtually not having a defined role on the court. Both of these teams were trying to shed these players off. Both of them. There was no need for either of them to retain these guys, considering the steps that they are trying to take. And so, from that standpoint, you could understand why a trade like this goes down, even if it does look weird on the surface and at first sight. And for the Lakers as well, from that standpoint, Jaden Hardy played in 23 games. Again, not much after the trade deadline. Never got to start with a team. But in the limited time that he did get, he shot 42% from three. He averaged 12.6 points. And he gave this team at least an injection of some form of scoring when he was on the floor for them occasionally. And the Lakers, with the numbers of athletes that they have lost already, they have recuperated that in some way with getting guys like Quentin Grimes, with getting Colin Sexton for a 2-year, $19 million deal. They've recuperated that a little bit. Now you add more potential for it in another cheap form. Hardy is fairly inexpensive in his own right. He doesn't cost all that much. And you are finding a way to pair up, yet again, another player who had ties with Luka Doncic, fitting into the idea of making the Lakers his team, going in his direction, going wherever he takes them as a player. Because Hardy and Doncic with this deal become teammates once again. They were in Dallas for the 3 years that he was there, and they now gain that connection back. So, you're getting his guy back on the roster, even if it doesn't seem like all that much right now. And even if they never see the court together when it comes to how Redick will construct the rotations, I mean, there's something to that as well, just to add to the team chemistry a little bit. Now, again, they say that Hardy's defense is somewhat fine, and, maybe it can be. If it is off the bench for the man, that is a plus for a Lakers team who would be needing that after losing Marcus Smart this offseason as well. And again, you would have that in Hardy for much cheaper, not costing nearly as much as even Marcus Smart did, getting the deal he picked up with the Rockets. So, there is not a lot of risk for either of these teams. Like, if it doesn't pan out, it doesn't. But, hey, these players did not pan out for the teams they were originally on. Let's explore something and see if we can, on the Wizards side, get the most out of him in a reduced role while assisting the Wizards on the path of potentially coming playoff contenders. Oh, and also, ironically enough, if there are games where Ayton is intended to start, give Anthony Davis a spot, finally sliding down to the 4, and granting him the big man he always wanted. Who would have thought that? Again, this all started because Anthony Davis was clamoring for a big man and a true center so he could slide down to play power forward in Los Angeles, gets traded to the Mavericks, gets injured on the Mavericks, gets sent to the Wizards, gets injured before he can even play a snap of action with the Wizards. And DeAndre Ayton is the answer to that equation, to finally give him a big man to pair up with. Nobody would have ever thought that in a million years, but here we are. The NBA can be weird sometimes. Nevertheless, you got it. And it's something a little different. So it's worth exploring just to try to take that improvement. And the Lakers as well are also on a timeline to try to win and improve in the best way possible, understanding that DeAndre Ayton was literally making them so much worse. You at that point, if he's going to continue to be a net negative, it's not an asset worth keeping. You get a man in Jaden Hardy who can, at the very least, seem to offer you great three-point shooting off the bench, which is genuinely been a problem for the Lakers over the past few years when it comes to general three-point shooting. The question is, can he consistently hit open three-point shots? Because, again, a lot of the three-pointers the Lakers have converted on, even with them not having the greatest of percentages, it's always the contested three-pointer. They are far less efficient on the open three-point shots, which is like, those should be practice. Those should be routine. You're in the NBA, you're walking through those shots every single night and day, pretty much. And we're missing wide open looks. Like, that is unacceptable. If Hardy can at least do that, and I mean, he's typically been a good three-point shooter at 38.6% for his career. If he would have finished out a fuller season with, honestly, I guess both teams in general, he played in only 57 games. Because again, even with the Mavericks, it's like his role was just questionable. Like, he got some burn from time to time, but in the later end of the season, especially in playoff time, they didn't really, look to involve him all that much. So if he can do that here and pick up some sustainable minutes while proving himself to be a quality shooter off the bench, that'd be perfect for the Lakers. And you don't give away much in doing so. So yeah, that's as weird as it is to say. Like, you can see where both teams are coming from, honestly. The Clippers signed Jordan Miller to a 3-year, $15.3 million deal. And I feel like Jordan Miller himself got a standard contract last season after what he did in 2024 as a backup. So again, you love to see that rise from a young player. And he hit double-digit scoring averages for the first time in his career, and he shot over 53% from the field again. This time over the course of a full season, across 60 games. He never got a start, he got one start, but man, he proved himself to be a valuable player off the bench in so many ways. And again, for a team who really turned it around from one of the worst starts in NBA history across a 33-game stretch in the regular season last year, to have all these depth pieces contributing like this is a pretty good sign. Now it's just about putting it all together and, breaking out of that shell of mediocrity. That is the next step for them. But I don't have a problem with them investing in Jordan Miller in this way. As weird as it is for him to be a 6'5" small forward, he has genuinely proven himself as a shooter, as an athlete, to make an impact on the floor every time he's out there. And that's just not something that you can question after a while and after seeing it that much. Just think about it. And, we're in the summer league now. This man, Jordan Miller, made his jump from participating in the summer league. Getting those eyes on him throughout that time. And putting on some pretty good performances. Then he got called up to the NBA roster off the two-way deal, and he has just taken off ever since. They say that progress isn't always linear, but this is a situation where, hey, you can clearly see it with Miller over the past few seasons, and it's a very good story from his standpoint. His job was never really that secure. There was always an opportunity for, at a moment's notice, him to be traded, him to be cut, him to be waived from this team. But he has earned his keep in a very cool way. Because to know that those things are on the table and for you to still perform to the same high level without hesitation, without complaint, without any missed steps whatsoever, is huge for him specifically. A $5 million deal plus might not be looked at like all that much compared to some of the other NBA contracts that go around. But for Miller and for a player in his position who might be trying to elevate from the G League to the NBA, even after a number of years, that can literally change your life. So, that's why, hey, you have the summer league going on right now. It's just hey, you still got to approach the game with the same kind of mindset. Because there are going to be teams there looking in on you, seeing what you can provide. And you never truly know who's paying attention to what you're doing out there. If you play well enough, there could be someone calling you in the next few days, trying to see if they can pick up your rights and trying you out to see if you can make the cut for their team and potentially add something to that roster that they were missing or lacking. You just never know. And it's that kind of mentality right there that can make the passion for this sport incredible across the board. So I definitely respect that for Jordan Miller. No complaint for me there at all. The Timberwolves signed Trey Lyles to a 1-year deal, and this news came via John Krawczynski John Krawczynski, a senior writer for The Athletic. Trey Lyles is a name that admittedly had not been heard of in a long time. And, quite literally, he sat out all last year. He last played with the Kings for the last 3 full seasons, and then also after the 2021-22 trade deadline, where he was sent there from Detroit. With him joining the Timberwolves, it is the 3rd Northwest Division team that he's been a part of. He was drafted by Utah and also spent time in Denver immediately after that. So it's safe to say that Trey Lyles, a 31-year-old Canadian man, he will be 31 throughout the season, has gotten around a little bit. And honestly, he is another player where it's like, I'm not really too high on him as a player, but with him being 31 years old and out of the league for a year, to get called back up, it's not by accident. You would understand what you're expecting from Trey Lyles at this point. Ironically enough, he is a little younger than even Kyle Anderson, who he is directly slotting in for off the bench, I would believe. That's how they have it set up, at least. I mean, there aren't many other direct replacements that would make much sense. And Trey Lyles, to pair up right behind Trey Kaufman-Brennan, who they also drafted from Purdue in the 2nd round of this draft, he is somehow, someway, listed as the 5th string power forward right behind him. Now, I'm sure that this will change as they go throughout the offseason here, and they go through team practices. Because when it comes to situations like this, even where Terrence Shannon Jr. is listed as the fucking 3rd string power forward for some reason, like, oh, hell no. 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 They better not, right? But you're trying to earn your spot here. And you're trying to earn your position on the depth chart. So, yeah, it's fair play. Like, you can't expect Lyles to come right in and take over the role immediately, but I'm sure that by the end of the offseason, he'll be able to win it over all these guys and become at least the 2nd string power forward, at the very least. With Lyles, what you would expect is solid defense as a player who stands at 234 pounds. Like, he's just going to throw his weight around at you, and he will defend you that way. I don't expect much lateral quickness out of him after a year off of basketball, and I'm not expecting him to grab a lot of steals, log a lot of blocks. No, he'll be there. He'll stay disciplined. He'll remain home. That's what you can expect from him on that end. And as long as you are getting that at an elite level in this team, that will carry much more weight than a lot of other aspects. He also is an all-right shooter. In a career-high season for him in 2019 with the Spurs, he shot 38.7% from the field. From the three-point line, I should say. He also shot 38.4% from 3 in 58 games with Sacramento in the 2023-24 season. So, from time to time, he'll get up to that elite level. For his career, though, he's a 34.7% three-point shooter on at least 3 attempts per game. So, he's not going to light the world up with his shooting, but he should be serviceable enough. And I think that is the idea. The Wolves are getting that here. Again, not necessarily a guy who they'd be investing in long term. He was off for a year. He may have a lot of rust on him. They simply view him as a way to, again, bring in the next big power forward for them. And just supplement the idea that they have, at least for the time being, lost Julius Randle officially as of today. Right? And again, that was a good thing. By no means are we discrediting that at all. Julius Randle had to go. But you want to try to make up for that as best as you can. And clearly that wasn't by getting another $30+ million per year level power forward. They chose LaMelo Ball for that reason, to trade for, once the money opened up. So you have to supplement that in other ways, and this happens to be one of them that they prefer here. The Knicks signed Andre Drummond to a 1-year, $3.9 million deal per Shams Charania, getting back into that side. And yeah, this is a Mitchell Robinson replacement in every sense of the word. Matter of fact, Andre Drummond was Mitchell Robinson before Mitchell Robinson even really got onto the scene in the NBA. Let's be perfectly clear. Again, we've said the similar story about Andre Drummond all the time. The me-bounds were in during his tenure with the Pistons. He could not really offer you much else as a floor spacer. He was a traditional center in every sense of the word, and a lob threat at times for that team. But whenever you needed him to crash those boards, there were not many bigs around that time, especially at the peak of his Pistons career, much better and much more known for this skill than him. Now, I'm not going to say this as if Andre Drummond is exactly that same kind of player right now. This is a man in Andre Drummond who will be entering his age 33 season, who has honestly seen some of that athleticism over the years diminish just with time alone. Like, you're not expecting him to really elevate, even like Mitchell Robinson was last year. You're not expecting him to do that in the same way that he once did. It would just be naive thinking. But he can still offer you an intensity and a physicality on the offensive glass similar to Mitchell Robinson. And to, again, speak to the same point, like, yes, seeing Mitchell Robinson being about 5 years younger by this point and going to a rival team crushes you. It does. It also, again, will not be a long-term deal for Andre Drummond, because I think that they would want to try to find a much younger solution years down the line at center. Although, moving on from Ariel Hukparty as well is also kind of tough, if he could have found a way to assume that role. But I digress, right? Andre Drummond, if he was only worth that, you had to lose Mitchell Robinson at that point. You had to. Even if Mitchell Robinson would have signed for cheaper, that could have potentially still put the Knicks in danger of the apron. And this is a deal that ensures that you at least give yourself some serviceable help at the backup center position for this season, while also protecting your books and keeping your money open a little bit. That's what the Knicks were constantly worried about throughout this offseason, and they are able to, kill two birds with one stone there. Don't expect Andre Drummond to shoot 35.9% from three also. Don't expect that. I don't care if he started to, develop this three-point shot or whatever. No, I'm not saying that he's going to come to New York and expand on that even further. What a miracle that would be. But that's not going to happen. We'll keep this within realism and suggest that Andre Drummond should still be a high-level rebounder for this team. I mean, even in a season where, with Philadelphia, he's still splitting time with Adam Bona. He's getting a few starts with Joel Embiid being hurt. In Philadelphia, he was able to average 8.4 rebounds overall, and did so last season exactly. while also grabbing 6.4 points per game. So, doing that, also understanding that for his career, he averages about 4.1 offensive rebounds per game. Led the league quite literally for 7 straight seasons in a row. 7 straight seasons in a row he led in offensive rebounds. And not to mention that this is a guy who was also, in terms of total rebounds per game, a 4-time league leader. So, it gets to a point where, you will gladly move on from Mitchell Robinson if it means that for low value, you still get a man who on any night can pull down 15 boards like it's nothing. Not even Mitchell Robinson himself, even, without being a full-time starter over the past few years, even his ass can't say that he has consistently led the league in rebounding, aside from 1 year with offensive boards. So, you'll take it. You will certainly take that, man. The Jazz signed Josh Okogie to a 2-year, $12 million deal. I liken this to them having Chris Dunn on their roster. You're not going to really gain much of Okogie's contributions when it comes to anything on the ball, especially as an offensive player. But, you favor his shooting with him being it's just, I don't know, I'm kind of iffy about it. Yes, in theory, as the Post stated as well, right, you favor him for his 3-point shooting, and to be fair, last year, he shot 38.5% from 3. It looks like it's something that he's had to consistently improve on as well, which can be a good thing, because for his career, you're looking at that, you're seeing that he shot 31.2% from the 3-point line on average for his overall career. That can look like a little bit of an issue. The Jazz do not need that. That would become very problematic. But if he can at least offer you above average shooting, then that's fine for a player worth $6 million per year. You're not bringing him in for much more than that. Okogie also legitimately has good defense as well. Although, looking at the depth chart here, they don't even have him listed anywhere right now. Again, that is something that I'm sure that will change. We'll have to see. I could see a world in which they would make Josh Okogie a third string small forward, because that's traditionally what he has played and can play at times. He's primarily a shooting guard. That can happen there as well. Cody Williams is currently listed as a third string for both. Cody Williams isn't. Nah. You would have to invest very, very little in the Cody Williams stock at this time. It is virtually non-existent. If that is Okogie, if that is who Okogie has to beat for a starting position, by all means, yes. That should be light work for him. That should be light work. Of course, the Jazz have familiarity with him as well. This is also the second time in which he'll be playing for a Northwest Division team, because he was primarily with Minnesota to open his career. Again, doing some of the same stuff. Just a hell of a hustle player. Every team needs one. Every team needs one. You cannot hate that idea for them at all. But moving on to the Wizards. Recently, they hired Patrick Ewing as a new assistant to Brian Keefe in that system. And it's just fitting. I mean, in every sense of the word. It's the house that Patrick Ewing helped to build. After all, he was in Georgetown. The star player of that team. Under, I believe at the time, if I'm not mistaken, let me see, because I want to make sure that I get this right. Totally. I do not want to screw that up at all. Just to make sure here. Yes. Okay. Under the John Thompson era as well. Being coached by him, becoming the face of that team virtually in the early 1980s before he got drafted by the Knicks. Based in D.C., rooted there from, his own birthplace. He literally made that team a mainstay in that specific region for years and decades even after that point, as Georgetown continued to add more and more talent to that team simply because of Ewing's presence. And of course, his reputation in the NBA adds to that allure. Able to do it in college, able to do virtually everything in the NBA aside from win an NBA championship. He's one of the most accomplished players generally in NBA history, and he is royalty in college basketball in DC. So to bring him back to this site, especially with Capital One Arena hosting a few Big East games and Georgetown games, it's perfect from that standpoint. The jury would still be out there to see what he and Keefe will work on together to get this team's head on straight. And they won't have to talk it over across the next few months. That is reasonable to suggest. I mean, damn, you think about what having a former Georgetown player and a Hall of Fame player in the same system. What that can do for the psyche of all those young players who, again, genuinely have the skill. But aside from Anthony Davis, may not know what it truly feels like to win and consistently win. You could even say Trae Young might be outside of that cycle, but again, he only had the one run to the Eastern Conference Finals, people will say. A lot of people on this team, they're searching for that run to a potential championship. Every team wants to do it, you would believe. The Wizards have not had the means to get there over the past few years. And that can really, that can mess you up. It just truly does something to your mind. You're expecting to compete at a high level every night and knowing that you just can't. That shit sucks. Patrick Ewing is about to really change the entire dynamic of this young and hungry roster. And it is going to be a sight to watch. So this is a very good hire for the Wizards as well. The Grizzlies earlier today, Persham Sharania allocated a 3-year, $30 million contract offer sheet to Quinten Post. Now, this is not the first time that a team has done this. And there have been other notable situations where this has happened. Namely, the main one I think about is how Miles Turner was involved in all those trade rumors for years. And they offered the Pacers DeAndre Ayton, ironically enough, an offer sheet that was seen as a very expensive amount for him. Now, of course, he was coming off of a great performance in the season prior. He had continued to build upon that stock a little bit, at least enough to warrant more buzz and more attention around the league, and the Pacers chose to bite. Now, I can take a look and see what that specific contract was for them, because ironically enough, in my head right now, I'm thinking that it was the same amount that Walker Kessler actually ended up getting, but I can check that out real quick. Let me see that real quick. Yes, they offered a 4-year, $133 million contract to DeAndre Ayton in 2022. Yes. And the Suns were able to match the offer sheet. They brought him back. It was still seen as a bit of an overpay, and everything else proceeded to happen with him then having a bit of conflict with, his lack of effort and also Monty Williams' coaching style. He got sent over to Portland, and the rest from there is, So that is an example that sticks out to me when thinking about an offer sheet. And that's essentially how they work, for those who may not know. You offer it. It's not an actual signing yet. It can become that. It's just a team throwing it out there and seeing what the potential response may be. The Warriors have the rights to Quinten Post right now, and they drafted him in 2024. So in this instance, the Warriors, as Shams Charania also stated, have until a certain amount of time to match the deal. And if they don't by that point, then Post's contract is confirmed. The Grizzlies will pick it up and sign him at that time. The deadline for the Warriors is 11:59 on Tuesday, which happens to be tomorrow, as of the recording of this video, 11:59 p.m. tomorrow. So there's still an opportunity for Post to be a Warrior when it's all said and done. The Grizzlies are just making their pitch, their bid on him, and seeing what happens in this auction style scenario here. I'm just thinking about it right now. I'm like, I don't really know how the Warriors would respond to this, because the idea for them has been to search for a true big man in the cheap manner over the last few years, and Quinten Post was a good example of that. The thing with him is that he just was never able to materialize. I mean, they were expecting him, coming out of Boston College, as one of the older players in that draft, to be NBA ready, to have a great frame for a center bill. He could space the floor. He could defend very well. These are all things that were projected for him at the draft in 2024. And the only thing we were really able to find out about Quinten Post over the last couple of years is that he can shoot well. He was never really able to use his physicality to his advantage. I mean, the amount of times that he would get mismatches, seemingly inside the painted area, and he'd still opt for shots further away from the basket than you'd expect for a man in Quinten Post who stands at like 7 foot, if I'm not mistaken. Like, he is on the taller end. You'd expect him to bully players around. Post was never able to do that. And maybe at the end of the day, he is a center that's more so about the finesse game. But it just served to the Warriors' detriment. And when it came to the rim protection, he was poor at it. He was poor. I can't mince words at that. You know, they were expecting him to be one of the better shot blockers out there. And at the very least, a guy who could alter shots at an elite level. Neither of those things came to be. Neither of those things. Like, you just... And I guess you can't say all that much because he was a second rounder. But I don't know really what to think about him potentially moving on. It's like on the one end, you do lose a big man on your bench. But at the same time, he did not play with that kind of intensity that you would expect from a big man. And by no means is he of the traditional mold, but still. When it comes to being an elite defender, when it comes to going vertical against the smaller competition, you couldn't even get that from Quinten Post. So it's kind of like, you may as well, I guess. You may as well. The Grizzlies would see Post, if he is to join the team after the deadline, if the Warriors don't match, then I would expect Post to be right behind Zach Edey, in theory, as a center. Again, this man is 7 foot tall. He's 7 foot tall. He is already 26 years old, again, as one of the older players in that draft. But even in a lesser extent, if he can even offer you a little bit of what Zach Edey does as a shot blocker and as a rim protector, this works out very well for the Grizzlies. And it gives them some shooting at the 5 position that, frankly, they don't possess. I mean, you look at all these guys, and Cameron Boozer does promise to be a good shooter, but he's primarily going to be their starting power forward. Isaiah Stewart just had a down season in three-point shooting last year. Taylor Hendricks is meh overall as a player. And Olivier Masson's Prosper has also really disappointed from long range. So Quinten Post might be your surest thing there. And when it comes to that, he has shot 36.4% from 3 overall. If you're getting his 2024 shooting across the 42 games, that'd be great. He also had a decline in shooting last year. So that is something that the Grizzlies are really going to have to work around. Because you lose Santi Aldama in the trade, and you're also thinking, hey, it could be a replacement for him too as well when it comes to the frame. That could be a case to mention as well. But it only works if Post is giving you those things, and he's going to have to, coming off the bench, getting limited minutes in that organization. Oh, man. Yeah, no, it's a crazy time for the Grizzlies, though. In all honesty, man, they have completely turned it around on their end, man. You know, it's crazy to see that as well. You know, we just talk about the Wizards doing that. We talk about the Grizzlies doing that. And, you know, one player sometimes can literally change everything for a franchise and change the direction in which they want to go. Now, again, going back to some of that taking shit and everything like that, it's like, yeah, like, hey, man. Oh, my gosh, dude. It's insane to think about, bro. But moving on from that into another deal that just took place earlier today, as the Lakers actually lost them. And it's just crazy because, as I've been saying the entire time, and I guess, as we kind of discussed with them getting Sandro Mamukelashvili last week, the potential for them to lose him was there. But he was their most consistent shooter throughout the playoff run that the Lakers had, as well as the tail end of the regular season. Like, I'm telling you, you don't just put together, I think it was like 14 straight games or so, maybe even more than that, from three-point range, shooting greater than 50%. That doesn't just happen by accident. Finally, for one of the first times during his tenure with the team, he put it all together out there on the floor. Regardless of what you may be able to say about his defense, like, he genuinely, you just could not ask for a much better showing. And when they desperately needed it, shooting, he answered the call, especially in Game 4. And then you just go through all of that. You have him put together that kind of work just for him to get subbed out in the last few seconds of the game on what would end up being the final play, pretty much, for Los Angeles that mattered. He's not even on the floor after he had just brought them back into the game with his three-point shooting. And as a result, the Lakers lose, the Lakers get swept, and now everything in this offseason has taken place, where they've lost LeBron James, where they have looked to make this Luka Doncic's team, and where a lot of the questions surrounding their free agents at the time needed to be answered. And you heard it from Luke Kennard, you heard it from Marcus Smart, and you heard it from Jackson Hayes. They traded DeAndre Ayton. Like, the Lakers have gotten active. But the one name that had consistently been out there for all this time was Rui Hachimura. And it just made no sense. Like, I think that a performance like that would warrant some form of a contract extension. And we never even got close to that. For some reason. Never got close to that. So, considering what they've already invested, I guess it wasn't a surprise to see him go. But earlier today, the location matters a lot more, because it would be the Clippers who would sign Rui Hachimura to a 2-year, $28 million deal. And yes, the Lakers are apparently rumored to go after the likes of Jonathan Kuminga, who they would have to get on a veteran minimum contract, and also Jonas Valanciunas at the backup center position, which could also be difficult to pull off. Neither of them are going to do what Hachimura was able to do from three-point land. Neither of them. You lose John Collins if you're the Clippers earlier in the offseason, and you get back a player in Rui Hachimura who is not going to have the same athleticism, but comes in with all the momentum on his side. Again, just think about how crazy this is. Over the last 15 games, with the last 5 of the regular season as well as the entire playoff run, he shot greater than 50% from the three-point line in each and every single game. Each and every single one. He was potentially, aside from LeBron James, the second most valuable player in that series against the Thunder, despite them losing all 4 games. Not to mention, whenever Hachimura has been in the playoffs over the years, when it comes to, I suppose, a minimum amount of three-point attempts per game, he is the all-time leader in three-point percentage in the playoffs at 51.6%. I'm not bullshitting either. I'm not bullshitting. 51.6 all-time, marked in gold, indicating an all-time record. Now again, across 41 games, the sample size compared to that of other players, generally speaking. But with what he was just able to do in the most recent playoff run, taking all of that into account, you lose that. And you don't even really make an attempt to sign him to any extension whatsoever. He would have only been worth $1 million more per year than you gave to Mamu Kelashvili. And across a 4-year stretch. Damn. That's crazy. The Clippers, that is a hell of a move for them to get. Hell of a move. He fits right in. Not with his athleticism, but with his lethal shooting ability. That's simply what they need. And when it shows up on here, they have him coming off the bench as a secondary power forward behind Derrick Jones Jr. Because admittedly, the thing with Hachimura is that you can question his defense. He is not a great wing defender. He is not a great individual defender. And so that's the trick. You know, playing him for that much time could become an issue. But as a backup player, you are not losing much sleep over paying him that much to shoot that well, that consistently from deep range. And it's not like he needs the ball in his hands to be effective. You can still hand that responsibility over to the likes of Benedict Mather, who at some point, if he were ever to break into a starting role, could really shake up the entire league, I would think. But Mather would handle that responsibility as a six-man off the bench. So you're not going to ask Hachimura to do that, and he doesn't need to. He'll still backdoor cut exceptionally well. He shoots well generally, taking a lot of high percentage shots. He shot no less than 51% from the field virtually over the past 3 seasons. Essentially doing that. Shooting well from 3, taking advantage of post touches every now and then. He's started to develop that shot a little bit, right? He can cut at a moment's notice. And, you know, having the likes of LeBron and even Luka Doncic at times able to find you on that back end, it continued to pay off for Hachimura as he would take advantage of those looks every single time. And it wouldn't change much with the Clippers. Plus, you now have a guy like Darius Garland being the starting point guard here. Like, he will get some of those same opportunities with this team. And it's a slight discount as well compared to John Collins being retained for the $17 million per year that he got from Detroit to have a questionable fit with that roster. You gotta love the Clippers being able to pull that off. Like, genuinely. I mean, again, like the Lakers are going to really pay for losing him to a team that is only located just a few short minutes away from them. Like, that's no different than, having Jaylen Brown moved to the 76ers. It's no different than that. It continues to tie it back in all together, man. Those teams were for years supposed to be battling against each other after 2019 in so many high-stakes games and situations, and here we are in a case where you fucking lose a 51.6% playoff three-point shooter to a division rival and to a city rival as well. In city rival. There's just no shot, dude. There's no shot. So let me check and see right now if there is anything else, because that would pretty much be it for now. Unless... have a look, see it. And yeah, that looks like that is everything. So that will do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.